Just about the future then of the ANC and what exactly comes out of not just this day, but certainly this year. Of course, it is an election year, and this could be quite heavy as well for the ANC and the ruling party as support has continued to drop off over the years. Let's chat now to Professor Patrick Bond, of course, follows the political economy quite extensively. Professor, thank you so much for the time. A happy new year to you as well then. It certainly is an interesting time for the ANC. They don't have the mass rally. Will they still have the same impact?
That's a good question, because the state of the branches always ebbs and flows. And of course, it has to get stronger just before an election and a municipal election year. We don't know the date because of the virus. Will be critical to test whether it's really as strong as it appeared under President Ramaphosa in the revival. But don't forget the last time there were municipal elections in 2016. The ANC actually lost 3 major metros. So it's going to be a good test what happens this year with these branches.
Yeah.
And not having a January 8th statement in person may or may not make any difference. I think the real question is the ANC financially capable from the Tuli House to boost these branches when they need to get out the vote.
Yeah. Are they? Is the ANC financially capable?
Well, there are major problems, and I think the critical one is whether the likes of the Bosasas and all the other, let's say, dubious commercial and entrepreneurship and white monopoly capital and Western multinational corporate donors will be unveiled if we can get some better transparency on who is funding not just the ANC but the other political parties. So I'm sure if you're a big business person thinking, do I give to the ANC to help them boost municipal power where there have been so many failures? Will I be called out once transparency does kick in?
So the question marks also come with regards to their youth system. I mean, that has continued to flounder and fail for quite some time now, and they haven't been able to successfully create new leadership for the party sort of moving forward. Do you think that really comes to the fore at any point in time now, or is the focus still just the immediate future for them? Let's just get through this and win the next election.
Yes, I think it's let's get through this with the promise the last day or so of a vaccine for the health workers, 1.5 million doses. That's the big hope. The next concern would be, how do you get 40 million vaccines into people's arms this year, which is the promise. And then there's the youth. And, you know, all around the world, the youth took a year off from their main concern, which is the climate catastrophe. And I haven't seen much from the African National Congress to suggest either the leaders, the elders, or the youth wing has put this on the agenda the way some of the youth in independent civil society have demanded. And that included protests in September of 2019 that were, you know, they were quite impressive in all the major cities of the country. So if that's the main youth concern, do they have a future? The ANC youth, I hope they do. I hope they are concerned. Some say that they are more concerned with fashion and cars. And let's hope a next generation comes up that O.R. Tambo, that Walter Sisulu did when they had the Youth League about 70 years ago as the vehicle to drive the ANC back into action. Yeah. That's the big question. Will the youth rise to their historical generational challenge? Yeah,
you speak about that generational challenge. It just reminds me, all those names that you've just quoted there are literally the legacy of the ANC, or, you know, particularly when I was growing up, that is what I knew as the legacy of the ANC. Considering where we stand now, can the ANC still be proud of its legacy, considering that we sit with an unemployment rate as it currently stands, poverty-stricken as it currently sits, promises unfulfilled till this day?
Well, yes, I think, Arbola, that's the question for President Ramaphosa's January 8th statement. Can he talk left in the traditions of full liberation, as you say, unemployment, inequality, poverty at record highs, and certainly much worse today than a year ago, thanks to the vaccine, the COVID-19 virus. Now, the talk left, you hear, on January 8th, has to be measured in reality by the walk right that Treasury usually imposes 6 weeks later. And this year it's February 24 for the budget speech. So you might get more rhetoric about the way the economy must change. We must have more environmental sustainability. We must have more inward industrialization and localization. But typically that's to be, I suppose, given a reality check by what let's call it a neoliberal bloc in Treasury, the Reserve Bank, some of the economic ministries, what they impose within days, within weeks. And the austerity regime is very, very difficult now because that has meant that the small increases in payments that go to people who've been so adversely affected by COVID-19 over the past 10 months, those are being eased out and phased out and chopped off. And I think with unemployment at record highs, as Stats SA acknowledges, and with inequality at extreme highs, with some of us able to work from home and not feeling this as much as the ordinary person, the informal sector, and all of those who've been strangled economically. This is going to be the test whether the ANC in politics can influence the Treasury in government to stop the austerity regime.
Yeah. Have they lost their Teflon nature, if you want to call it that, their bulletproof armor, so to speak? Because over the years, with every election, their support has certainly been waning. Yes, fine, the number of people who vote has also been decreasing, but still, their portion of that vote every year seems to come down. Are they worried this year that they may lose it?
Well, that's right. 2019 was a little bit of a kick up after the terrible 2016 results. But I think you're right that the critical question is whether people abstain from voting. It's not just that they're voting for alternatives. Both of the major opposition parties are weaker than ever. The EFF still faces potential prosecution for VBS. The EFF has doubled in power from about 6 to 12 million. So they're 6 to 12%. They're getting stronger. The DA got much weaker, and they have race representation problems. So the ANC will no doubt win the vast majority of the votes. But the real question is whether people feel that these parties are worth coming out to vote for, especially, if you're in queues, if you don't have electronic voting. It's going to be a tough year for anyone in politics.
Yeah. Patrick, Professor Bond, just one more question then, really, with regards to, I suppose, the political space in South Africa. Is the issue then the fact that we don't have a viable competition, a viable political base to really choose from when it comes to leadership of this country?
You could say that. I mean, you certainly have a lot of talented politicians in the opposition and in the main party, but it's a culture, isn't it, of these politicians really not having the roots anymore. The disconnect might be partly the representation system in Parliament, where we don't really have effective constituency politics. And that means where you find some maybe more vibrant politics around the world, even the most boring and reactionary country for many years, the United States, they got their, let's say, intensity back through what are called the primaries, that are contestations within each of these parties. We've seen a fair bit of that. But to me, you're right. It's a good question whether politicians in this country are not too distant from a base that's getting angrier and angrier. And you can see that through, for example, data about the protests or the anger in the working class as their wages have gone down and unemployment's gone up. And we don't really see the politicians getting the fieriness, channeling that populist anger in a way that leads to constructive change, do we?
Yeah, we certainly don't. One can argue then, of course, that to have a viable democracy, you need as much competition as possible. So many questions could be asked in that regard. Professor Patrick Bond, thank you so much for the time, though. Really appreciate it. Focusing a lot more on the political economy as the African National Congress does indeed celebrate its birthday today, January 8th, indeed being that day, but unfortunately going to have to celebrate that under virtual circumstances.